Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, March 1st. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 185 days. The game against Michigan in 271 days. Ohio State landed a major commitment on Sunday from one of the top players in the 2022 football recruiting class. Buckeye Scoop's Mick Walker spoke with Kyion Grayes during his visit to Columbus this weekend. Mick, what was it that made Grayes decide to pull the trigger and officially commit to the Buckeyes?
Oh man, there's a variety of things that Kyion talked to me about, but I think the number one thing that stuck out to him was the environment at Ohio State, and especially with Kyion, with the way Coach Hartline is recruiting right now, it takes a very certain type of guy, especially after the 20 class and then the 21 class with the Mecca. You have to have a certain type of personality, and Caleb Burton and Kyion Grayes both have that. They are ultra competitors that just want to come in and develop every day, and that's what Kyion mentioned to me in his workout. In his interview that we did. For the article for his commitment, he talked about just how having those guys in front of him will make him want to get better each and every day. That's something he has to just continue to focus on. That's what his biggest thing was, getting into an environment where he knows he's going to be developed and that he's going to be able to compete for national championships. And when you put those two things in, when it comes to wide receivers, there's not many universities that get better than Ohio State with Coach Hartline.
Now, we've talked a little bit about Grayes recently. He was one of the players Andrew Morgan discussed last week from the 7-on-7 tournament in Arizona about a week ago. But for people who might have missed that, can you give us just a little scouting report on what the Buckeyes are actually getting in Grayes?
Yeah, so Kyon's a great guy that can play inside and outside, 7-on-7 a lot. They use him as a matchup, sort of a matchup guy, put him in the slot, and they have two larger wide receivers in Tucson Turf that they put outside of him. But at Chandler, he's a guy that plays a lot on the outside. That's great on either double moves, deep routes, stuff that can get him open down the field, because he has not elite speed, but he has very good speed. Both his parents were track athletes. His mother ran track. His father was a football player and did some track, I believe, in high school, maybe even in college. He's got very good speed. He's a track athlete himself. He's going to do some jumps and some different. I don't know if he'll actually get into sprints this spring, but that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about how high is his potential, because you got to factor in the athletic profile, but. Kyion, he's just a guy that can, and it's something that Coach Hartline, another thing that he really keys on top of just being competitive athletes, he wants guys that can separate. Some schools want big guys, some schools want fast guys. Coach Hartline at Ohio State wants guys that can separate, and I think that's the biggest thing that Kyion brings to Ohio State, is whether it's inside or whether it's outside at the Z or the X, whatever those titles are. I can't think of them off the top of my head. Coach Kyion can bring the ability to separate from any corner in the country, and he showed that down when I saw him in Miami. He had some great corners. I know he showed that when Andrew saw him down in Phoenix, and I imagine he'll show it again this coming weekend in New Orleans when they play at their final battle tournament and on the 7-on-7 circuit.
Yeah, the X and the Z are the outside positions, wide receiver positions at Ohio State, and the H is the inside if you are scoring at home. And it does sound like Grayes can fit in basically any of those spots. Mark Givler had a really interesting sort of impact of the commitment piece that he put up at BuckeyeScoop.com. You can find that is free for all, but you can find that at BuckeyeScoop.com. He talked about the fact that the fact that he can play inside and outside is something that they love out of Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And you mentioned how high he has the opportunity to potentially rise. He's a little bit like Jackson Smith and Jigba in another way too, which is when they first offered Grayes, I think a lot of people looked at his recruiting rankings and were like, why are they offering this guy? They just signed top 50 players. Like, why would you offer a kid who's in the, 300s or something, wherever he was at that point? And then lo and behold, he keeps climbing in those recruiting rankings. He's in the top 130 or so now nationally. How high could he end up in those rankings? And what does he still have to do, in terms of developing himself personally or his game to get there?
A big thing I think that like you mentioned, obviously he's a slighter frame. He's probably only about 160, 170 pounds. So that weight will come. With it being a track athlete, it's hard for him to keep that on and add weight. And that's something me and his father talked about, who's also Kyion Grayes. I talked to his dad about that. But the biggest thing that I think where it's going to be interesting to see when it comes to Kyon's ranking is the most outlets that rank these guys. And Buckeye Scoop will get to it soon when we come to our different rankings and stuff. But when you look at any other outlet that does rank them, a lot of these places love athletic profile context, and that's numbers like 100-meter dash, a high jump, a triple jump, something like that. And I was talking to Kyon's dad that they want to do all those jumps. They want to be able to show the athletic profile. They're going to find an event where they can give Kyion a verified laser time 40 because they want that on his athletic profile. Those are really, I think when it comes to like on the field skills, he's probably one of the better kids in the country because like I said, he can separate against anybody. He's got very good hands, soft hands that catches almost everything. And it's really just adding those numbers to understand how good of an athlete he is, because that's really the thing. Because you can tell how polished he is right now once you get into Ohio State and it's about Coach Hartline and Coach Marotti and all those guys in Columbus refining those athletic traits and making them into a sound wide receiver. And so it's just really understanding how much higher his ceiling is. And then once you sort of understand how high his ceiling is, that can sort of lead you into giving athletes a higher ranking. Because honestly, that's what a lot of ranking is in high school going into colleges. It's who has the best ceiling going into the next level on top of who is the best athlete. And I think Kyion is one of the best wide receivers in the country already. It's just getting that profile to see how high his ceiling is going forward.
Well, that was the good news over the weekend. There was also some bad news on the recruiting front for the Buckeyes. As I discussed with Mark Givler last week on one of these shows, cornerback Will Johnson did in fact commit to Michigan on Sunday. That is obviously not a huge shock. He is a Michigan legacy. But Mick, I am assuming that, as a 5-star corner, someone who was pretty seriously considering Ohio State, even though his dad did play football for Michigan, that's a player Ohio State is probably going to continue pursuing all the way through signing day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I jumped on after I went up to Detroit, but I did in January. I went up to Detroit and I talked to Will fresh off his visit to USC. And I feel very comfortable saying at that time he had Ohio State in the lead. And that's what I talked people who cover Michigan. That's what they also agreed, that Ohio State was up in the lead. And I don't want to say they blew this one, but that was at the time when Michigan had no defensive backs coach. They hadn't already hired Ron Bellamy from West Bloomfield, who's a guy that is very close with Will's family and very close in the Detroit football scene as a coach at a powerhouse like West Bloomfield. That's just losing Will is going to sting a little bit, but I really don't see it. It's hard to look at it because you saw Ohio State was in with Denver Harris, in with Imani Jackson, in with Will, and to see him. But they already have Jaheim Singletary. To see these guys go is tough, but you have Jaheim Singletary, you have Jair Brown, who I both saw them. I mean, they're both very talented corners. I feel like I lost track of your question here, but I think Ohio State's in a very comfortable place losing Will, and it sort of sucks to see him go because I do feel comfortable saying Ohio State led, but bringing in what they brought in last cycle along with what they're going to bring in this cycle, the defensive back room is very well stocked after bringing in Kerry Combs, and Ohio State will be facing off against Will Johnson, and I don't really think they're going to be losing much when it comes to wide receivers that Coach Hartline's bringing in.
Yeah, Mark Givler, I think last week wrote that if they bring in the two guys that have got committed right now, Jaheim Singletary and Jair Brown, and like a warm body, it's a pretty good recruiting class at cornerback. And if you have those two guys and you add one more good player, even if it's just kind of a top 100 guy, then it's arguably still maybe the best cornerback class in the country. So probably not exactly panic time for Ohio State in cornerback recruiting right now. Things also did not go real well for the Ohio State men's basketball team yesterday either. They fell behind by 16 at one point in the first half. They managed to cut it to 2 after a hot start in the second half, and then they couldn't hang on to the ball at all. They made one shot from the field in the last 10 minutes of the game, ended up losing 73-57. Mick, was this just kind of like one of those games, or with a 3-game losing streak, is there now something that Buckeye fans should be legitimately worried about with this team?
It's tough because you mentioned the fact that it is the bookend now of a 3-game losing streak, which makes you sort of raise your eyebrow and wonder if there is a long-term concern. But it just didn't seem like today was one of Ohio State's days. I on the tail end of the broadcast, you heard the announcers talking about Ohio State is even one of the top teams in the Big Ten at free throw shooting percentage, and they shot horrible from there as well. It just, when it comes to getting the ball in the basket, it was not Ohio State's day. It wasn't great on the turnover end, which is something that's alarming, but it's something that Ohio State with 2 older guards and Dwayne Washington and CJ Walker can get back under wraps and sort of get that back to where they want to be for when they make a tournament run. You just have days where you can't make shots, and that was one of them yesterday for Ohio State. You have to rebound, get one against Illinois next weekend, and then hopefully we'll talk about it here in a second, but hopefully get 1 or 2 wins in the Big Ten tournament and have a good performance in there as well.
Yeah, Ohio State, Chris Holtmann has basically said I think they're just kind of tired right now. They're off now until next Saturday, so they've got 6 days off, or five days off, and then play on the 6th day. And this is a kind of weird week. This past week, 7 of the top 10 teams in the nation lost at some point. It started to look to me like there really are not more than maybe a few really great teams in the country. which should make a really interesting and wide open NCAA tournament, which is always fun. Now, you tell me if I'm crazy here. Ohio State closes with Illinois at home next weekend. If they beat the Illini and make it to Sunday in the Big Ten tournament, they don't even have to win the Big Ten tournament. I mean, we think we've seen over the years, the committee basically doesn't take the Big Ten tournament championship into account at all. If they beat Illinois and just make it to the Big Ten tournament championship, I think 3-game losing streak or not, I think there's still a pretty good chance they're still a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Am I crazy, or am I onto something there?
No, you're totally not. You're not crazy when you think about it, because right now, like you mentioned, they're on a 3-game losing streak. You turn around, you beat Illinois in the next weekend. You turn around, you have to get an opening round win against whoever they put in front of you, Wisconsin, Indiana, something like that, Rutgers. I don't know who they get. And then, like you said, maybe you get another Illinois or an Iowa to pick up two wins against two top 10, two top 15 teams, gets you 2 more quad 1 wins, and adds to their already huge stack that leads the country in quad 1 wins. And those are metrics that the NCAA tournament committee came up with. It's what they look at a lot, and to have that high number is something like you talked about when there's not a lot of teams that are really compelling for that. Well, there's a lot of teams that can make a slight argument for that 4th spot. Ohio State's going to have a pretty big trump card when it comes to quad 1 wins. So it's not crazy to think that if they can turn around this 3-game losing streak and win 3 games to end it with Illinois' opening round, and then maybe another Illinois or an Iowa, and then heck, who knows? Maybe you get into the conference championship game against Michigan, and that even helps a little bit. You're looking at another 3 to 4 game winning streak after turning around and having this 3-game losing streak. And that if you turn around, you end the season on some wins, you could totally see them going to Indianapolis as a number 1 seed. I think that's totally understandable.
Well, that was just one of the things that we had some great coverage of this weekend at BuckeyeScoop.com. Tony Gerdeman was at that game. Mick was over on campus talking to Kyion Grayes on Saturday. Matt Goldman was covering the lacrosse game on Saturday against Rutgers. I covered the Ohio State men's tennis match against Penn State. Like, there was just wall-to-wall coverage this weekend at BuckeyeScoop.com. It's going to be another busy week there, so you should probably take a little time to check out BuckeyeScoop.com today and find all of our great coverage. All of that, plus our great team of insiders, our Ask the Insiders board, lots of great stuff going on there. Football is right around the corner. Spring football starting in just a couple weeks. So this would be, if you were thinking about becoming a member, this might be a pretty good time to do it. And also make sure you check out all of our great podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Spreaker. You can find them in all of those places. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Also leave us a 5-star rating and review. We would appreciate that because it helps other folks find those shows as well. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. We will talk to you tomorrow.